We are at the end of a long and controversial week for the Liberal government. It will end today with an apology, but not on the SNC-Lavalin affair. Instead, it's for the Inuit peoples. Joining us this morning from Winnipeg for reaction is David Chartrand. He's president of the Manitoba Metis Confederation and vice president of the Métis National Council. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you very much, Anne, for having me.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is set to apologize this morning to the Inuit today for the government's tuberculosis treatment that happened in the 1940s to the 1960s. Given the current controversy, is this an appropriate time to be giving this apology?
Oh, for sure. People have to understand the feelings of people that regarding going through horrendous times in their lives. For example, the Métis Nation right now in the 60s scoop, one of the top priorities that many have said during our consultation is they want an apology from this country. The veterans, Métis veterans in this country, that's one of the top, they've never been settled yet in this country on the matters that were promised them after World War II ended. And they too are demanding an apology. So the apologies mean a lot to Indigenous people, and it's something very, very important for us when matters of this nature, have taken people's lives and really major negative effects for their future.
It's an apology a long time coming. Part of the controversy, and we've learned about this portion of it this week, centers around the portfolio of Indigenous services. And former Justice Minister Jody Wilson Raybould, we learned from Gerald Butt's testimony, turned down the role of Indigenous Services Minister back in January. Some saying this was inappropriate for Trudeau to try and shuffle her into that portfolio. Gerald Butt said that she made it clear her stance on the Indian Act made her feel it was not appropriate. You say that's a hypocritical standpoint for Jody Wilson Raybould to have turned it down. Why do you feel that way?
Well, it's very obvious. If you're an Indigenous fighter trying to fight for your rights in this country, or if you're a place in Confederation, in fact, the biggest stumbling block for any development for whether it's First Nations or the Métis Nation or the Inuit in this country is the Department of Justice. In fact, that's the gatekeeper of the Indian Act. So if you look at it overall, how can you say it's okay to be the Minister of Attorney General and Minister of Justice in this country when you're knowing full well all your tools and all your lawyers, the tens of thousands of lawyers you have, their number one objective when you deal with Indigenous matters in this country, when you deal with self-government, inherent right, or sovereignty, is to prevent you from having that. So you can say I can be the minister of this file, but I can't be the minister of Indian Affairs or Indigenous Affairs because it suppressed me. As the Act is clearly one that has held back Indigenous people, truly has. But it's just imagine for a second. Now I can understand where the Prime Minister was going with his plan to put somebody with that experience. First of all, a Crown Attorney, a regional chief at one time in her history, a consensus user who uses consensus in her practice of managing affairs, which she'd need 600 bands to have consensus on. And then secondly, thirdly and fourthly, she has the experience of being Attorney General and Minister of Justice of this country, which, as I said, is the gatekeeper that continues. Look at our land claims. It took us 32 years to fight for our rights regarding our land claims. We finally won. Look at the Daniels case. Those cases take tens and tens of years to get there. And guess what? Guess who the gatekeeper is preventing you that? It's the Minister of Justice. So for her to say, I could be the Minister of Justice suppressing Indigenous people on rights and self-government, but I can't be the minister, because it's insulting to me to be the minister, in fact, that could abolish the Indian Act. And people have said this, and I want to comment on this. People have said it's like asking Nelson Mandela to manage apartheid. Nelson Mandela dismantled apartheid. That's the key. She could have abolished the Indian Act in this country. She could have easily got the trust of First Nations, and you can't blame First Nation chiefs for not trusting what has happened to them through all these years since the Confederation has been established in this country. So from that perspective, I cannot understand why she would say it's okay to be the Minister of Justice and use that platform to continue to fight against Indigenous rights and sovereignty in this country, but say I'm not willing to sit down and be Indigenous Affairs Minister and abolish the Indian Act once and for all. That would have been reconciliation's crown jewel if that ever happened. That would have been history in the making forever in this country. But for her to say that, I think it's kind of deceptive. It's, in my view, I call it hypocritical, because how can you say on this hand you can beat us up on this side, but you can't help us on that side?
Mr. Chartrand, that's all the time we have for this morning. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.